Hey everybody, welcome to my live stream broadcast of Financial Friday. Thank you very much for joining me. I am super excited to come back to you live. Those of you who watch my Wednesday broadcast, I was away for a few days earlier this week, and so I pre-recorded that one, but I'm back to being live and in person. So super excited with this week's topic. Every Friday, I'm talking about a topic that impacts your finances, things that people need to know. This is not one of my series of topics on lessons we should have learned in school, but if you haven't caught any of those, I'm super excited with those lessons and those things that we have been covering. But the fact of the matter is today I'm going to get back to a little bit of a topic about lending and about things that you should know about the lending world. And specifically, my talk today is going to be about mistakes people make moving out of state. There are a lot of people who have been moving out of state. And by the way, when I say moving out of state, this really applies anytime that you're making a move that is beyond a reasonable commute distance from your job. So if you are a real estate agent and you've got clients that either you're selling their home and they're going to relocate somewhere that's more than commute distance from their current home, or you are having a client that's relocating from outside of the area and they're moving from, again, somewhere that is not within a reasonable commute distance of their home, this applies to them. If you're a buyer or a seller or a mover, somebody who's looking to relocate, and even if you don't own a home and you're just looking to buy somewhere that's further than commute distance from your current home, this applies to you. This topic is very confusing because it takes what are the normal rules for lending and adds a whole nother layer of complexity to it. And I want to take the time today to really explain that. So thank you for those of you who are joining me live. I have the ability to respond to your comments live. So if you have questions about this, please post them on wherever broadcast medium you're listening to, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Please post any questions you have. If you're watching pre-recorded, if you're watching after the fact and you're watching a recorded version, please put your comments in there because I'll go back in and I'll watch for the comments and I'll reply to you and give you whatever information that you need. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the mistakes that people make buying out of state. And here's the reality. I want to start with what is it that everybody thinks is going to happen? So here's the picture that I have quite often where somebody calls me up and says, hey, John, I am living right here in California and right down the street from you, and I'm looking to buy a house in North Carolina, and I'd like for you to help me with that. And I say, great. And what they think is going to happen is I'm going to look just like I do right now at their last 2 years of employment history, their income, and I'm going to say, okay, well, hey, you make $100,000 a year. And so at $100,000 a year, you qualify to buy a $500,000 home. So here's your pre-approval letter to buy that $500,000 home in North Carolina. And that's not as simple as how it works. Because what the mortgage industry is concerned about is continuity of income. Where is your income going to be coming from for the next 3 years? So it's a critical thing, and it's a little bit goofy if you think about it. All I care about is what's your income going to be for the next 3 years. And if I can predict the income with a reasonable amount of accuracy over the next 3 years, I'm fine. So for example, if you are, I don't care, you're 60 years old and you have stable income, I don't know if you're going to retire at 62 or if you're going to retire at 65, but the fact is you have a good job that I know is going to last for the next 3 years because I have no reason to believe it's going to end. Then I'm fine. And I don't care that you'll be 90 years old by the time the mortgage is paid off. I don't care if the average person doesn't live until 90 years old. The only thing we care about is the next 3 years, and can we predict your income over the next 3 years? We often will look at the last 2 years to give us an indicator of the next 3, but only if the pattern is expected to remain the same. That's the critical key, is the pattern has to remain the same. And the biggest hurdle in this whole process of relocating is those patterns are different. The pattern of your employments, the pattern of your income, and where your assets are coming from are the 3 biggest hurdles that we run into when you look at relocating to a market outside of where you're at currently. So let's first talk about occupancy. The simplest way to buy a home outside of where you live is to buy it as a second home. Now, John, what's a second home? I don't have a first home, so how can I buy a second home? A second home, there's only 3 definitions of occupancy. Are you going to occupy this home as your primary residence? That means that the wage earner, the person who's bringing home bacon, is within a commute distance of their place of employment. Or if there is no physical place of employment, then it is where you spend a majority of your time. That's your primary home. So when I say there's no place of employment, if you're retired, then you have no physical place of employment. If you work remotely, then you have no physical place of employment. So when you think about buying a home out of state, when you think about buying a home in a different market, you have to say to yourself, okay, what am I going to use this home for? Is it going to be my primary home? It can only be your primary home if your primary job is able to be performed the moment you're moving into that home. That's a major issue, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes on how that plays into this. But the second option, number two, all right, the second option of occupancy is a second home. We often call that a vacation home. What's a vacation home? A vacation home is a home that's used for your own personal use, that is greater than 50 miles away from your current home, and is typically in a vacation or resort-like destination. But that last line of definition is a bit flexible. So for example, if you said, hey, you know what, John? I do business in Los Angeles all the time. I have my house in Sacramento, but I fly down for business in Sacramento, in Los Angeles, at least 2 days a week. And I'm down there so often, it really doesn't make any sense to have to pay for a hotel 2 or 3 nights a week, every single week. So you can buy a second home in Los Angeles. Now, is that a vacation or resort-like destination? Maybe Anaheim, but certainly not downtown Los Angeles. I don't think that's anybody's going to consider that a vacation or resort-like destination. But it is a second home because it's for your own personal use, greater than 50 miles away from your primary home. So if you said, hey, John, I'm relocating to North Carolina, but we dig a little bit deeper and we find out, well, you're really not. You just are expanding and you have your business growing into North Carolina, but you're going to be back and forth. Then and you want to keep the house here. We have to decide what makes the most sense and how do we explain which one is going to be your primary home and which one is going to be your second home. And a lot of details go into that, a lot of different calculations that we're looking at as far as how much time you're going to spend there, square footage of each home, amenities, where's your family and your kids going to be, all those things come into play. But the fact is, a second home you can use to buy a second home. And if you buy it as a second home, I don't care that you don't have employment there. I don't care that you're within a reasonable commute distance of that new home because you're buying it as a vacation or secondary use home. The third option is you can buy a home as an investment property. Now, if you say, John, I'm going to move to North Carolina, but I'm moving there in 1.5 years, and I'm afraid that interest rates are going to go up so significantly that in the next 1.5 years, I won't be able to afford a home in North Carolina. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm going to use that as a simple example. So you say, I think interest rates are going to go up so much that it's just not worth it for me to buy a home in North Carolina in 1.5 years. I want to buy it today. You can buy it now as an investment property. A lot of people do that actually on vacation homes where it says, hey, I want to relocate to Idaho or Montana or Florida when I retire. You can buy it right now as an investment property and you can rent it out for that 1 or 2 or 3 until you retire. And then once you retire, then you can just kick the person out and occupy it as your primary home. So occupancy is really a critical piece of when you're thinking about buying a home outside of your market is what am I using it for? And is it really best to be called a primary home? You're definitely getting the best interest rates, the smallest down payment on a primary home. But you're going to have a lot of the challenges we're about to talk about. Or you can call it a second home, which means higher interest rate, bigger down payment, but fewer of the challenges we're going to talk about. The key with a second home is you personally have to be able to afford to make both payments. Because on an investment property, you can count the rental income that's coming from the investment, from the tenant. But on a second home, a lot of people say, well, it's my second home, but I'm going to rent it out for Airbnb. Well, you do what you want to do. But the fact of the matter is you're claiming it's a second home for your own personal use. I can't count any rental income. So you have to make enough money to pay the payment on your primary home and pay the payment on the second home. If you go and call it an investment property, then you're renting it out. We cannot use an investment property under short-term rentals. So if you said, John, I'm buying it as an investment property and I'm going to rent it out on Airbnb, I can't count Airbnb income because it's not predictable yet. You can tell me, well, I'm going to rent it out for $500 a night, and it'll be rented out 30 days a month. That's very hopeful thinking, but the truth is you're not going to have it rented out all 30 days. You're going to have some vacancy. Who knows for sure if $500 a night is the right number? And you're going to have expenses. You're going to have costs associated. So it's kind of like running a business. If you're self-employed, and we'll talk in a couple minutes about what if you're self-employed and you're relocating from one market to another. But the fact of the matter is, if you're starting a new business, even if you're staying in the market you've always lived in, it's a new business. I don't know how successful it's going to be. And Airbnb is considered a new business in the eyes of the mortgage banking world. So just be aware of that fact that you can't just say, hey, I'm going to call it an investment property so I can count rental income, but I'm really going to rent it out on Airbnb, because we're going to expect that you're doing it as a month-to-month or lease rental, long-term lease or a month-to-month rental. And we're going to base it on rental income that is typical for month-to-month or extended leases, not based on the income you're going to get if you rent it out nightly. You can make a whole lot more on Airbnb renting it out nightly, but you have a lot more volatility. And so as the lending world, we're only going to count rental income for the long-term lease average income instead of the actual income that you think you can earn by going with Airbnb. All right, so that's the big picture on occupancy. Why does all that matter? Well, here's why it matters. Because a lot of people ask, the mistake that they make is they think they don't need to have a new job when they move to the new city. They expect that, hey, I'm gonna find a house in North Carolina. I'm going to move there. I'm going to get settled and moved in, and then I'm going to find a job. And John, you should be okay with that, because look, I get paid $40 an hour as a nurse. I don't know, I'm giving a nurse $50 an hour if you're a nurse. And there's a lot of demand for nurses. And so, I'll be able to move there and make $50 an hour as a nurse. They're just fine. We're not okay with that. As an industry, if you're counting the income has to be a known income that you're going to receive once you get there. Now, there's a few ways you can do that. You can transfer your current job, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Most people, you're just plain going to have to look for a new job first. That's really what I tell people is, hey, when you go out to that area, you need to talk to your current employer, see if they'll transfer you. If you can get a transfer letter that says, I'm going to transfer your job from California to North Carolina, that's great. Except we have to know how much you're going to get paid in North Carolina. And you can't say, well, John, it's the same employer, it'll be the same pay. That's not always true, because there's different cost of living adjustments in different markets. So maybe you made X amount of dollars living in California and getting paid in California, but in North Carolina, it's not going to be the same amount of income. So your employer has to say how much they're going to pay you and when the start date is. Now, the key is, and this is whether you're transferring with your same employer or you go find somebody else. Everybody always asks, well, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, you expect me to move there and live on the street when I get my job and then you'll give me a loan? Or are you going to let me move there first and get settled and then start my job? So the idea is we can use what's called projected income, but you have to have a contract from the employer that says you're going to start work on a certain date. And if your first paycheck is going to come before your first mortgage payment is due, we're fine. But if your first paycheck's not going to come until after that, we have to have extra money in savings to know how are you going to pay for that mortgage payment. Maybe your employer says, here we are, I'm recording this on August 12th. And so we're in August of 2022, and the employer says, hey, we have a position for you, and it starts on November 1st. Well, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at, if you purchased a home now, you're going to close in September. You do not make a payment at the end of the month that you buy in. You make a payment at the beginning of the month following the first full month you've owned the home. So therefore, if you closed in September, your first payment is November 1st, and you start on November 1st. I'm fine. But what if your employer says, hey, we've got a job for you, and it starts January 1st of 2023. Your job is lined up. They're going to pay, exactly how much they're going to pay you. And they're paying you $10,000 a month salary starting January 1st of 2023. You want to buy a house now. You want to get settled. You know that, hey, I know I'm going to have a few months off of work, but I want to get moved and settled and moved in and get the kids settled in their new school and all that stuff before I start my job on January 1st. Great. Then as long as I have a written letter from the employer that says, hey, you have a job, here's what the pay is going to be, and the pay is predictable. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about predictability of pay. But if the pay is predictable, then I can count that income. I can qualify you for the loan. The problem is your first payment's due on November 1st. You don't start work until January 1st, which means you have to pay for November and December's payments. In order to continue to keep the mortgage, you got to pay every month. So we need to know that you have enough extra money in reserves or additional funds left over after you paid down payment and closing costs. And we need to know you have enough left over to make those payments that are going to be due prior to you getting your first paycheck. And let's be honest, you get your first paycheck on, you start working on January 1st, you don't get your first paycheck on January 1st. Your first paycheck is January 25th probably. So we actually need to know that you have 3 months of payments to pay the November, the December, and the January payment. You must have extra money in reserves. But you can technically buy a home and have up to a 6-month gap in most circumstances between the day that you have your first payment due and the day that you're actually going to get your first paycheck. As long as you have those 6 months of payments in savings, we're okay with that. Okay. So it's critical that if you're going to relocate and if your income is not portable, I'll explain portable income in a moment, but if your income is not portable, then you need to have stable income in the new location within commute distance of your new home before we can qualify you and close the transaction. So that's really, really critical. A lot of people don't understand, and I want to reiterate that and drive that point home, because if you're watching this video, it's likely that either you or someone that you're assisting is going through this process or about to go through this process. So I cannot use the job that you have in your old location as proof of how much money you're going to make in the new location. I just can't do it. Again, unless that income is portable. I'll explain that in a second. For most people, your income's not portable. You have to go to a job and you drive. I don't care if you work at McDonald's. Okay. And I have no problem with people working at McDonald's. Matter of fact, they have really good pay scales right now. They have really good signing bonuses. But the truth is, if you have a job and you say, you know what, John, my industry, I cannot find work there until I move there, then find work in a different industry. Find work doing something else. People think that the stability of income has to do with what industry you're in. It really isn't that big of a deal. The fact of the matter is, what we care about is, can I predict that you are employable in this industry? And can I predict how much money you're going to make? And so if you think about it, if you have, maybe you're an electrician and you've got a certification, you've got education being an electrician, and you say, hey, I'm moving to North Carolina, but I'm going to start my own business out there. I'm going to become an electrician out there. I'm going to go work on commission out there. Then that's not stable and predictable income. What you can do, though, is you can go get a job at McDonald's and you can get that sign-on bonus and you can get the hourly wage and they guarantee you 40 hours a week. And now I can use that income to qualify you. Once you get moved in and settled, you can continue working the full-time regular job that you got while you're building the other job or while you're searching for that other job. And then once you're in the home and you have the loan, I can't stop you from changing jobs. So just remember, it's critical. It's like the number one mistake people make is thinking, well, John, I make a certain amount of money here, and so clearly I'll make that money out there or more. Trust me, I'm in high demand. We can't trust you. The global economy collapsed in 2007 and 2008 because, well, the mortgage industry thought we could trust people. Now, the mortgage industry is definitely at fault here, but the truth is those programs did exactly what people wanted me to do, which is we trusted you. We said, gosh, if you tell me that you're going to make $100,000 a year, I believe you. Yeah, the problem is that people use those programs in the wrong way. It collapsed the entire global economy, created a huge global recession, and crashed the entire housing market. All because we did what was common sense. So common sense doesn't exist anymore. Just because you've always made $100,000 a year every year for the last 10 years, and that you could qualify even on $50,000 a year of income buying that house in North Carolina, common sense says clearly you're going to be able to afford that because clearly you're going to make at least $50,000. Common sense does not exist in the mortgage industry. So that is what's critical when I want you to think about this process, is that you need to have a new job there, or you need to have portable employment. So what's portable employment? Well, really, it's somebody who's a remote worker, somebody who travels for their job. Look, if I'm based in Sacramento, but every Monday morning I'm put on an airplane and flown somewhere in the United States to spend the week working on site, and then Friday night they fly me back home, and then I repeat the next Monday morning. It doesn't really matter where I fly out of, does it? Now, the truth is the employer has to okay that you can fly out of anywhere. In other words, maybe the employer has you covering the Western United States and that you have to live within the Western United States because they don't want to fly you from North Carolina back to the West Coast every single week. So they want to employ people for the Western United States that live within the Western United States so that it decreases their cost of travel. So your employer, if you believe your income is portable, your employer must confirm that. So your employer has to give us a letter in writing saying that your income will not change even though you move to North Carolina, because your job is not dependent upon you living in any particular geographic location. We need that from your employer. Now, the hard part is some people don't want to ask for that from their employer until they know if they're making the move. And so that's when I take your word for it. I'm going to give you a pre-approval letter. If you tell me, hey, John, my employer's not going to have a problem writing that letter. Perfect. I'd like you to get that letter from them now if possible. Would you be comfortable getting that letter from them now? No, because I'm in the middle of contract negotiations, and I think if I say that, it'll kind of weaken my negotiation. I don't know what the reason is, but the fact is, okay, then I'm not going to force you to get the letter. But just know, if you can't get the letter later, you don't qualify for the loan. And here's the biggest problem: temporary versus permanent. So if you're a remote worker, a lot of people became remote in 2020 because of COVID. A lot of those jobs have stayed remote. And so in your opinion, it's like, well, man, COVID's over, maybe, but COVID's over and I haven't been asked to go back to work. So therefore I can work from home all the time. Or my boss says we're going to be permanently from home. They're never going to bring us back to work. Well, that's just what your boss said. But is HR going to say that? Are they going to put in writing that you can permanently work from home and you'll never be called back to the office? Ask Elon Musk. He told everybody at Tesla, hey, you got to come back to the office. And he made the announcement, I think, on Friday and said, everybody better be back to the office on Monday. And if you're not back to the office on Monday, I'm considering that your resignation letter. Well, guess what? A lot of those people moved out of state. They're in deep trouble because they need to be back to work on Monday. And so we have to have confidence that your employer is okay with you working remote permanently, not temporarily. Because our worry is, great, you're getting paid working for Tesla, making $200,000 a year. But if Tesla calls you back to work and you can't go because you're relocated, you're not going to likely find a $200,000 a year job in North Carolina. And maybe you are, but we can't predict that. We can't say that that would be true. We need you to have that job because, and this is the key, it goes back to what I said in the beginning. It's about, can we predict the income to stay the same for at least the next 3 years? If the employer says, we guarantee you that through 2030, this is going to be a remote job. Awesome. That's all I can ask for because that's 8 years from now. And I only needed to prove it for 3 years. It's the same as if somebody has a contract position. So if you go to work for an employer and the employer says, hey, this is a 6-month contract, but we renew contracts pretty consistently. Don't worry about it. We're going to renew your contract. You may not worry about it, but we are. Because what we're going to look at in that case, looking forward, can I guarantee you that it's going to continue for 3 years? No, because I have a reason to believe it won't continue. My reason is, well, it's a 6-month contract. So now I have to look backwards for 2 years. Is there any evidence in the past that gives me a reason to believe it's going to continue in the future? Well, have you worked as a contract worker for the last 2 years? And have they continued to renew your contract every 6 months for the last 2 years? Yes, they have. Cool. Then I'm comfortable assuming that the new contracts are going to be renewed or that you can find work in a contract capacity going forward. That's the key that we're looking at. So if you travel for your job, if you're a remote worker, your employer has to confirm that for us. All right, so one of the other mistakes people make is having to do with, what about my spouse? So we're making a move, we're moving across from California to North Carolina. And, my spouse is going to, we've got one person that has the primary job that's making the move, and the spouse is going to quit her job, his job, I don't care. And the spouse is going to get a new job after we get settled. I can't count the income that your spouse had been receiving because I don't have the ability to foresee it happening consistently for the next 3 years. And again, that's what's critical. If they find a job before you move and they get an offer letter, then I can count the income. But if they don't, then I can only count it off of one person's income. And maybe that's enough to qualify, maybe it's not, but I cannot count what we call a trailing spouse's income because we don't have confirmation it's going to be that they're going to find a job or how much it's going to be. It's really the same issue I talked about when I talked earlier about, do I have to have a new job in the new location? Your trailing spouse's income we have to have as well. All right, so what if you don't move at the same time? I had a client in this situation where husband and wife, and they lived in the Midwest, and one of them was moving out here to California, and the other one was continuing to live in the Midwest. So it created a bit of a challenge. And the challenge is that they had this primary residence in the Midwest that he was going to live in, and then we had the home here in California that only she was going to live in. So really what we ended up doing is we called it her primary home, but we had to count the payment of his home against her. And then he co-signed as a non-occupant co-borrower. So I was counting, it's kind of a unique loophole. I can walk you through it specifically how it works if that's your situation, but often it does create some challenges because we're looking at, what is the occupancy? Is everybody going to move with you soon? Are they staying there permanently? And is the new home really just the vacation or second home? If your job takes you to LA 4 days a week, but your family is staying in Northern California, then is the house in LA really your primary home? Because everything you care about is in Northern California. And so really one could argue the new house in LA is going to be your vacation home. So there's a lot of nuances here. And so every situation is going to look a little different, but I want to give you some heads up on the things to think about, the mistakes that people make that they say, oh, that's not a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. So now you're a big deal because you own your own business. So therefore it's transferable, right? Maybe. I had a realtor that was relocating about an hour and a half away staying in Northern California, but they were moving from one city to another city about an hour and a half away. And it was a bit of an argument because underwriting said, this was years ago, underwriting said, look, how do we know that realtor is going to be able to produce the same amount of income in the new city? And the truth is they're right. The truth is that anybody who is self-employed, if they're changing geography and they have to find new clients in the new geography, they're starting over. If you're a real estate agent, you've got to find new clients in your new market. Now, the loophole we used for this realtor is he said, no, I'm going to continue serving my past clients in my current market. It's only an hour and a half away. I drive around anyway. I drive a huge circle of areas. So I'm going to work in between those areas and I can do it. And I'll be able to maintain all of my income from my prior location while still expanding to the new location I'm moving to. We got the loan approved. Want to know the truth? The truth is, within the next 2 years after that, that realtor came back to me and said, gosh, John, this was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and my income's dropped. The good news is I'm still okay. I'm making the mortgage payment. Everything is fine. But man, I just assumed that I'd find new clients up here, and I really didn't plan on doing that much work marketing in my old market because that's an hour and a half away. And I didn't want to have to drive all the way. That's 3 hours a day if I'm going back and forth. And you know the crazy hours that realtors work. And so the truth is, in the end, his situation was exactly what the lending world is afraid of. So you have to think about, what is the business that I own? For example, the guy Todd Scrima is the owner of Summit Funding. If Todd Scrima said, you know what, I am going to move from the Sacramento area to Las Vegas, and I'm going to live there as my primary home, but I can run my business from Las Vegas. He can, because he runs the corporation. It's his prerogative to relocate the corporate offices, or he can do everything remotely via video conferencing. And the fact of the matter is, he does not need to be in front of his clients. So I am in front of his clients. I'm the one that's sitting down face-to-face, meeting with people, helping them buy homes. He's not doing that. He's running it from this level. Somebody who runs a large business, that they're not the ones who are meeting with the client in a specific location day in and day out, they can relocate and it's not a problem. But somebody who's a hairstylist, well, you're a hairstylist, you have your book of clients that you're serving in this market. You go to another market, you're going to have to rebuild that book of clients again. Your income is going to drop. Now, if you own a chain of hairstyling salons, you're traveling all the time to different salons. You're running it from the top. So that is portable because you can run the chain of hairstyling salons from anywhere. And the fact is, you don't need to report to that location every day for its income to be generated. But if you're the practitioner, if you're the technician, and your job requires you, if you're a home inspector and you're the home inspector, even if you own a small home inspection company, you're likely the head salesperson, even if you have people underneath you. So it's a real fine line between when is your own business portable and when it isn't. And here's the sad truth. We're not just going to take your word for it. Now, we're going to look to you to describe what's going on. We might even ask for your CPA to write a letter validating that to confirm it. And we're going to use a little bit of common sense that says, yeah, that makes perfect sense. You own, 14 McDonald's franchises between here and Los Angeles. The truth is you can live anywhere between here and Los Angeles, and you can oversee those 14 franchises just the same. So of course it's not a problem. So we are using some basic common sense, but don't tell me, hey, John, I'm going to drive 5 hours each way to report to work to run my business every single day. Obviously, that's an absurd amount of travel time, but even an hour and a half each way is kind of an absurd amount of travel time, except when it's typical. There are some markets that an hour and a half commute is typical. The truth is, if you worked in downtown San Francisco and you lived in Davis, it could be an hour and a half commute. And there's people who do it. But you're going to take the train, and then you're going to catch the ferry, and then you got to take BART. Okay, well, that's about an hour and a half each way, but you can be productive along the way. It's a major commuting corridor. A lot of people do it. And so we do apply common sense. And there's sometimes that we can use the job that you've had, whether it's your own job or a job working for somebody else, where we can say, hey, we can actually count that income because you told me that you're going to make that commute. And it logically makes sense. A lot of people do that. So just be aware, it's a little bit of a tangent on owning your own business, but it applies whether you're owning your own business or not, that it has to do with commute distance, and the likelihood of you really making that commute is a lot of what we look at. All right, so let's switch gears. What if I'm retiring at the same time that I relocate? I get that a fair amount. I had a client a few months ago who was looking to retire and relocate to Texas. Now, we made it happen. But the challenge for her was she did not, at the moment we were trying to get her pre-approved, she didn't have her retirement income nailed down. She had a bunch of money in the bank, but she didn't know how much she was actually going to be pulling out for retirement. And so there's lots of ways we look at retirement income. And I'm going to spend a few minutes on this to help you understand, because if you are retired or retiring, we've got to have a predictable number to use. And you can't just say, well, I have $1 million in the bank. You kind of can. There's something called asset dissipation, but it's a fringe product, and asset dissipation is not mainstream. So if you're talking about mainstream loan programs getting your best interest rates, you're typically needing to get an award letter that says, I'm going to receive this much money per month from each of these retirement sources. So maybe you have a pension and you're getting Social Security and you have a 401k. So your pension, they're going to give you a defined benefit. It says, hey, at this age that you're retiring, you're going to make this much. Now, I can't just use that chart. I can't use a chart that says, well, if you retire at this age, you're going to make between this and this. I have to have a letter for you that says, starting on January 1st of 2023, you're going to earn X number of dollars a month from this source of retirement income. It's critical that we have that same line of thinking like we did with getting a new job that says, well, if the income's starting on January 1st and I want to move now, I've got to have enough money in savings to cover the payment between now and when my first payment is due, I should say, and when you start receiving the retirement income. So it works exactly the same way if it's a defined amount. Social Security is a defined amount. But I can't use that generic letter that Social Security sends us all once a year that says, hey, you are likely to get X amount of dollars in retirement income if you retire at this age. We have to have an exact number. We have to have the letter that says you have been awarded Social Security and that your first check is going to be received on blank dates. Okay, those are easier. The 401k, the hey, I've got a bunch of money in the bank and I'm going to live off of that. That becomes, how do we turn that into a payment? Now, if it's in a 401k or an IRA or a Roth IRA, then you just have to go to your financial planner and set a dollar amount that you're going to have automatically sent to you every single month. And that money has to last at least, guess, anybody want to guess? At least 3 years. The same proof of income continuity that we're looking for. So if you have, let's just call it $360,000 in the bank, you pull out $1,000 a month, that'll last 30 years. And so some people say, well, gosh, John, I got my IRA, it has $360,000 and I'm doing a 30-year loan. So I guess you can only count $1,000 a month. That's not true. I can count $10,000 a month in income. So if you said, hey, I've got $360,000 in my IRA and my tax guy said that I'm going to pull out $10,000 a month out of my IRA, and that's going to last for 36 months. Now, it should last longer because you're going to earn interest on the money that's in there, but we can't think about the interest. So we just take the grand total divided by how much you're pulling out every month. If it ends in less than 36 months, I cannot count the income. So we've got to be really careful about how we count income and how long it's going to last. The same holds true. I didn't put this as one of my bullet points, but the same holds true when you are looking at income from like child support. Child support income, whether you're relocating or whether you're not, whether you're just buying a home in your hometown, that's a portable amount of income because it doesn't matter where you live, you're awarded the child support income. The key with child support income is that the income has to be expected to last at least 3 more years from the day you close the loan. And when we say at least, there's multiple times that child support income might end. Child support income could end either when the child turns 18 or when they graduate college, or I don't know, some other or that they might put in there. But we have to look at all of those ors and calculate the earliest, which is typically when they turn 18. I've never seen a child support order that guarantees beyond 18 unless they're doing something else. So if the child is older than 15, I can't count the child support income for that child because it's not expected to last for more than 3 years. If the child is 12, then I expect that that's going to last for 6 more years, which is fine. And you're going to say, John, this is a 30-year mortgage. How in the world are you guys qualifying us to pay for the 30-year mortgage if 100% of my income is going away in 6 years? We just kind of hope you're going to figure it out. The truth is we got to draw a line somewhere. We can't say, well, let's make sure you have 30 years worth of payments in the bank. That's impossible for us to expect. So the industry has always used, I'm not saying they will always, but they have always used a 3-year line of demarcation. If income is expected to be earned for at least the next 3 years, we are fine. Okay. So that's another way to look at it when you're talking about income, is you've got to make sure that if you're retiring, you need to make sure that that retirement income, that you have choices on how much to pull out, that you're pulling out enough that the principal will last for at least 36 payments beyond the date we close on the loan. That's the key. Might take you 2 months to close on the loan. And if you start it today with only 36 months worth of allocations, when we close, you only have 34, you no longer qualify. All right, so let's switch gears here. Let's talk about what if what is different if my new employer is going to relocate me. So relocation is a whole cottage industry, and there's a lot of unique things that happen there. The fact of the matter is, relocation really is about how badly an employer wants to get you working for them. If you're the only person in the world that has a particular skill set and they need somebody with that skill set, then they're going to, for sure, pay to relocate you to the city that they need you to work in. That's pretty simple to understand. So depending upon how unique your skill set is, depending upon how badly they need you to fulfill that skill set, will determine if they're going to offer any kind of a relocation package. If they do, there's a few things that are unique. The first thing is that typically a relocation package offers you discounts on services. So sometimes there's a built-in discount on lenders. Sometimes there's a built-in discount on the realtor's services. Oftentimes they'll pay your closing costs on the relocation. And sometimes they'll buy the house that you're currently living in so that you don't have to worry about the time it takes to sell it. Again, think about how badly you are needed in the new city. If you're the only person that can do this job and you can't do it remote and you have to do it, that employer is not going to take the risk of your current home not selling and causing you to not make the move. So a lot of relocation packages include a buyout of your current home. A lot of corporations, my first major career was working for Radio Shack. So I worked my way up from being a sales associate up to being a district manager. And as I looked to the future, my future was going to take a lot of travel. It was going to take a lot of moving across the country, and that wasn't for me. So that's why I decided that wasn't the way I wanted to continue going forward with my career. But the fact is, how do they use the relocation packages for people that work for Radio Shack? Well, Radio Shack doesn't really exist anymore, but they did. And how did they relocate somebody so that, hey, if they moved me to Fort Worth, Texas, which is where their corporate office is, and then they said, okay, now we need you in South Carolina. Yeah, but I can't move because my house, prices have dropped a little bit, or I can't find somebody to buy it quick enough, and I can't afford to have two payments. And they're like, you know what? We're going to buy your house, and we're going to take over your loan, and we're going to make sure that you're whole, because they needed me in South Carolina. And then 3 years later, they said, okay, now we need you in Wisconsin. Okay, they're going to sell the South Carolina property for me and move me to Wisconsin, because they need the right person in the right place, and they cannot let the housing market or the time that it takes to sell a home get in their way. But that's all negotiable. So you need to talk to your relocation person if you're relocating and say, hey, what are my options here? Because I'm worried about selling my home and getting it sold fast enough and being able to buy something else out in the new market. And so you need to explain to them how important that is to you, and just recognize everything is negotiable. Everything. So if the employer wants you bad enough and you're like, hey, the only way I'm going to make this happen is if you buy my home from me right now, and I think the market value is $500,000, and that's what I want you to pay for it. Well, if they want you bad enough, they'll do it. So it's just something to be aware of. The other thing is, if you are being relocated and you're getting special incentives from the relocation company to use a particular realtor and a particular lender, you have to decide what those incentives are worth to you. The truth is that those realtors and lenders have special deals, special arrangements that say, hey, we will pass along significantly lower fees because you're referring us a high volume of business. But think for a second. The people who do that often, not always, but often, are doing it because they cannot self-produce, self-source enough business to keep their business running healthy, which means they're likely not as good at what they do. I'm not saying that's true all the time, but it's something to be aware of. And so when you have someone that you're working with that's part of a relocation team and they're not pulling their weight, that's often why. Because they're part of that team because the relocation company is trying to find the cheapest bidder. The cheapest bidder is somebody who's not really good at their job and is selling themselves only on being the lowest bidder, and you get what you pay for. So I suggest if you're in that situation and you're not getting good service from the people that are part of the relocation team, that you tell that employer that's relocating you, stop, this is not working for me. And if you want me to go to work for you, then I need you to let me hire my own realtor and my own lender, and I still want you to pay that cost because your people are not performing and I cannot do that. So that's very, very critical for you to understand that's an option for you. All right, so let's transition to, do I have to sell my current home before I move? There's a video I did a few months ago. You'll find it in my YouTube library, and it talks about buying a home when you already own one. And I spent like a whole hour talking specifically on that topic. So it's a great video. We should be able to link it down below once we got this recording finished, the live version finished. We'll link to that video down below. But the fact of the matter is that you don't have to sell your current home before, but you have to be able to either afford, there's three options. You can sell your current home before you buy the next one. You can sell your current home at the exact same time, concurrently with the time that you buy the next one. Or you can sell your current home after you buy the next one. If you sell it before, that's great. You're not a contingent buyer. The problem is that you're homeless. You got to rent somewhere. Maybe if you're being relocated, you might have a corporate apartment they can move you into. For a lot of people, when they're moving from one state to another, you really are better off selling your current home first and relocating and renting, getting a temporary housing kind of a situation, because now you're established, you can learn the neighborhoods and know exactly where you want to live. There's a big argument to be made that you're better off selling where you're at, moving to the new location, getting established in your job, figuring out commute patterns, figuring out school districts and neighborhoods and layout of everything before you commit to the home that you're going to buy. And then you buy the home after you've been there for a little while. Huge proponent of that under the right circumstances, but you don't have to sell a home first. You can go find a home to buy and find a buyer for your home and close them concurrently. Problem is that which one do you find first, and are they really going to wait for you to find the other party? So that's the challenge if you try and do it concurrently. And if you want to buy the new home first and then sell your old home after, you have two major problems. Where's your down payment coming from? Now I have something called a bridge loan. I have another video that I'll link talking about bridge loans. You can use a bridge loan from the sale, from the equity in your current home to put as a down payment on the new home. So bridge loan is an option, but that's one of the hurdles if you want to buy a new home first before you sell your current home. But the second hurdle, if you want to buy a new home first before you sell your current home, is the hurdle of monthly payment affordability, because you've got to be able to afford to make both monthly payments. Even if you got a bridge loan, you don't make a payment on the bridge loan, but you have to make a payment on the current mortgage that you have on your current home and afford to make the payment on the new home. Many people don't have the financial breadth or income in order to afford to carry two mortgage payments. So just be aware, it's simpler because you don't have to worry about, gosh, I don't have to live in 3 different spots, meaning I don't have to sell, rent, and then buy. I don't have to worry about finding a buyer and seller and all the issues that go along with that. And you're actually not as competitive when you're writing an offer to buy a new home, and you're not as competitive in finding buyers to buy your home when you're contingent upon the sale of your home. So you need to talk to your realtor about that and really break that down. And this really kind of this, I think I've answered this. Should I find a home before I list my current home? That's up to finding a great realtor and having that realtor in both markets. You got to find a realtor to sell your home and a realtor to buy your home, and getting them on the same page of what's our strategy. Do we list first? Do we find a buyer on our current home? Do we find a new home to buy first? There's a lot of moving parts to that. And I just want you to be aware you need to find a great realtor to make that work. Talk about realtors in a couple minutes. All right. So what if I want to buy a new construction home in the new location? People ask me this all the time. Oh my gosh, John, I'm going to move there in North Carolina. I'm moving in January, and I want to buy a new construction home that's going to be ready in March, but I got to put my deposit on it now. And so we've got to make sure that we qualify. Well, the problem is I can't tell you that you qualify for a home in March in North Carolina because your job is here in California. And so it's the same problems that I've talked about already, which is that you have to have income that either is portable or income that is in the new location. And that's even harder to do on new construction because it's so far out. So if you're thinking new construction, your best bet is to sell your current home here, or if you don't have a home to sell, no big deal, move to the new market and rent in the new market and get a new job established there. Once you've got that new job established, then you're good. Now, I want to circle back for a moment. I talked a little bit earlier, and I want to cover this again. I don't know that I finished this thought. What if I owned my own business? If you own a business that is it requires you as the technician. So I say, hey, John, I own my business, and I am a hairstylist, and you're relocating from Northern California to North Carolina. You need to be out there for at least 1 full year and have a full year of taxes in that new location. So for someone who's self-employed, we want 2 years of being self-employed, but we can have you've got a history of being self-employed. We just need at least 1 year in the new location saying, hey, you've been able to maintain the same amount of profitability. So that's how you buy a home if you're self-employed, or you go get a real job, which I can count the income while you're building that self-employment. But just be aware that when you're looking at getting a new job in the new location, it needs to have stable and predictable hours. And so if you have a job that you get, hey, I got a new job in the new location, John, and I work between 20 and 32 hours a week. I can't predict how much income you're going to earn because it's variable. So then you say, okay, John, then I'm going to go get another job that pays me 20 bucks an hour plus commission of X number of dollars for everything that I do. Well, the problem is I can count the 20 bucks an hour for 40 hours a week, but I can't count the commission. Even if you made commission before selling the same thing in your prior market, the fact is you've relocated across the country. I don't know that you have the ability to maintain the same amount of commission. I don't know that there's as much demand in that part of the country for the product that you're selling. And so if you have any variable component, overtime, commission, bonus, being self-employed, and you have a history of doing that in your current location, I still can't use that variable component until you've been doing it in the new location for at least a year. You say, John, how do I do that? How do I move there and have income for a year there when I need a house to move to? Well, that's where you end up renting, or you get a job for the time being that doesn't have a variable component, and then do a side job or change jobs at some point down the road to go into the variable component type of industry you want to be in. But the fact of the matter is we have to be able to predictably count your income in the new location. All right, so let's do a couple of quick hit thoughts before we wrap up. If you have any questions, if you're watching live, feel free to post them right now. If you like something that I've talked about, feel free to put that into the comments as well. I really appreciate comments and feedback. I've got about a half a dozen people watching right now, so I'd love for you guys to give me some feedback. All right, be aware when you relocate to a different state, the rules are very different. States charge property taxes different in each location. And California is governed by Prop 13. Other states don't have the same type of rules. So how much you pay in property taxes can make a huge difference. I had a friend of mine who moved to Texas a few years ago. And they said, oh my gosh, it's going to be so much cheaper. Housing prices are so much cheaper in Texas. We're going to have a significantly lower monthly payment. Until we looked at how high the property taxes are. So they got a cheaper housing price. They thought they were going to save a huge amount of money in monthly payment. They didn't, because the property taxes were significantly higher than what property taxes were in California. Now, I haven't paid attention whether Texas property taxes have changed good or bad since then, but it's an example. And just saying, just do your homework, because property taxes are different in every state. So is homeowners insurance. Now, insurance is insurance is insurance. Insurance companies are national, but I'll tell you that Louisiana is having a really hard time getting any kind of insurance because of all of the hurricanes and floods that are happening. Pretty much all the private insurance companies have said, I'm out. I'm not insuring anything in Louisiana, which means that the government has to step in and provide some kind of insurance, and it's nowhere near as good a coverage and typically a lot more expensive. The same thing's happening here in California. Insurance is getting significantly more expensive, specifically in high fire danger areas. Insurance companies are backing out and saying, I'm out. I am not willing to provide fire insurance, homeowners insurance in these high fire areas because it devastates our company when a wildfire goes through and destroys 3/4 of the homes in there, and I've lost a huge amount of money. I can't do it. So the state government steps in and creates the California Fair Plan. That makes it more expensive with less quality coverage. So you need to be aware that when you're looking in a different state, homeowners insurance can work very different. And so just because a $500,000 home in California is going to cost me this much in property taxes, insurance, mortgage payments, the fact is the mortgage payment is based on what your loan amount is, if you do a 30-year loan or a 15-year, the term of the loan, and the interest rate. And interest rates are the same nationally pretty much no matter where you go. But the difference is the property taxes and the homeowners insurance can vary significantly. A couple of last things before I wrap up. Don't forget to factor in your relocation costs and timeline. Okay, you're moving across the country, you're moving across the state. How are you going to get your goods there? How much is it going to cost you to do that? Be careful as you're researching moving companies. We've all seen the horror stories about people getting basically held hostage by the moving company saying, hey, we're ready to deliver in your city, but the amount just went up by $6,000, so you need to pay that before we deliver your stuff. And you're kind of stuck because they have all your stuff on the truck. So make sure you're researching what does it cost to move your stuff and how long is it going to take? Because often they move them in batches and they say, okay, I'm going to pick up your stuff at the first week of September. Okay, and you figure out, okay, it's about a 4-day drive to get to Texas, and so it'll be here by the 5th of September. No, because they're going to leave Northern California and they're going to drive to 7 different states to pick up and drop off other people's stuff until they finally make it to Texas. And so they create a loop and they add people's stuff and take people's stuff out of the same semi truck so that they aren't just literally taking a half a truckload of your stuff from point A to point B. So it could take a month to get your goods from California to Texas. You need to be really clear as you're talking about relocation. Talk to the moving company about how do they do the move and how long is it going to take? Are there multiple stops in between? Are they storing your goods somewhere in between? What's the security you have to make sure that nobody's going to break into the truck? How's their insurance? Lots of things you got to pay attention to. All right, do I need a lender in that area? Honestly, I am a firm believer in local lenders. So be careful because, for example, I'm only licensed in California. I'm working on some licenses in other states, but the fact is, no matter what, I'm only local here in Northern California. Now, some markets, it's okay. They don't really care if somebody's local. The fact is that there's a lot of loans that are being done by big companies like Quicken that don't have local people on the ground. So is it as big of a deal? No, but I think it's critical to have somebody that's in the market that understands that market or does a lot of loans there. So my company is licensed in about 45 different states. So if you called me up and said, hey, John, I want to buy in North Carolina, I can start the process and get you pre-approved. And then I've got somebody in North Carolina who can take over and can be boots on the ground locally in states that knows all the rules in the state, get the process finished out, and they're licensed in that state, which is obviously critical. So the next step is, how do I find a good realtor? What I'll tell you is talk to your current realtor. If you're selling a home here, talk to your realtor here. Realtors have networks of realtors across the country that they have vetted, and they can refer you to a realtor in that market. Okay, so it's critical that you get a referral. Don't just pick up the phone and call a random person whose name was on Zillow when you looked up a property out there. You want to find a realtor that you can trust, and the best way to do that in a new market is by referral. When should you engage a realtor? You should engage a realtor as soon as you are thinking about buying a home, even if you don't know exactly where you're buying. Now, I'm not a fan of using multiple realtors, but the fact of the matter is, if you say, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm moving to North Carolina, Texas, or staying here in Sacramento, then you probably should get a realtor in each one of the three markets. So find the realtor in Sacramento, have them refer you to somebody in North Carolina and somebody in Texas, and just be direct. Hey, I'm not sure if I'm moving there or not, but I need to figure it out. And if I do move there, I want to use you as my realtor. And then you want to make sure that you're building a relationship with that person and helping them understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish and how. The final thing before I get into any last questions anybody has, by the way, if you have questions right now, again, about a half a dozen of you that are watching live, please feel free to post those questions in the comments. If you have anything that you've loved, that you appreciated, that you learned, I'd love to hear that in comments as well, whether you're watching live or recorded. Post those comments and I'll be able to follow up on them. But here's the other thing is, can I buy a home without ever seeing it? Hey, that's my first typo. Yay, I've been doing these for 6 months. I haven't had a typo yet. That's my first one. Without ever seeing it. So the answer is yes, but should you? Now here's what I would say. If I was relocating across the state, across the country, and I'm not yet living there, I'm not gonna fly out every time a home comes on the market. I'm not even gonna fly out to figure out if I wanna write an offer. But I'm going to look at it through virtual tours. I'm going to have my realtor put me on FaceTime and walk the house with me. And then if I like it, I'm going to write the offer. If every state, every municipality has different rules on contingencies. When can you get out of a contract and under what circumstances? As long as you have the ability to get out of the contract within a certain amount of time, then you can do your due diligence during that time frame. Now, if you're in a state or a municipality that says, nope, you put out $5,000 in the beginning and you get none of that back if you don't complete this transaction. Well, then you got to be careful because you're putting up $5,000 on a house you've never seen. But I do not suggest that you close escrow without ever seeing a house. What I would suggest is at the point that you got the offer accepted, you need to fly out there. You need to take a look at it. You need to make sure that it is everything you expected it to be because you are marrying that house. Look, rates are up right now and people are worried it's a bad time to buy a house because rates are up. But at some point, I fully expect rates are going to come back down. Check out my YouTube channel for information on why I think that's the case. But the fact of the matter is, I think rates are going to come back down as we get into a deep recession in the next couple of years. But you're marrying that house. You're dating the interest rate, and you're going to be able to find a new interest rate when they get better. But you are marrying that house. Do not marry the house sight unseen. So I do not want you to, you can, but I strongly discourage you from buying a home without being able to see it with your own eyes. All right, gang, appreciate your time. Appreciate you listening. If you have any questions about anything, please let me know. Please subscribe, share, like, comment, click the notification bell so that you'll get notified every time I do a new video. I really appreciate everybody trusting me and looking to me for advice on this and anything else financial related. And I look forward to talking to y'all soon. If you need a mortgage, give me a call.